Welcome to Spotlight on Women in GRC, a podcast series counting down to the Women in GRC Awards 2026 on the 2nd of July. This podcast is sponsored by CoreStream GRC, and it's a series to shine a light on the women shaping governance, risk and compliance, exploring their backgrounds, experiences and perspectives on what's changing across the industry. I'm your host, Lucy Montague, and today I'm joined by Lauren, a risk director at a leading global telecommunications company and a previous Women in GRC Award winner. Hello, Lauren.
Hi, Lucy. Great to be here.
Lauren, could you just introduce yourself and talk about your current role and a little bit about your career journey?
Sure. So I'm Lauren de Thibault. I started off my career as a competition and regulatory solicitor. So I spent 7 years at the law firm Slaughter and May. Since then, I've worked in 2 telecommunications companies. Firstly, I did some commercial law. Then I moved into compliance, then governance, and now, as you said, I'm a risk director. So it's been a bit of a squiggly journey, but everything is related. And it's been really, really interesting to get lots of different perspectives from disciplines that sort of complement each other, but are also vastly different.
This is why we wanted to have you on, Lauren, because you have covered that compliance, risk and governance piece. So hopefully we're going to get some good golden nuggets from you. Can I just ask, what first drew you into the world of GRC? How did you fall into this sector?
Well, falling in is definitely the right words to use. Being really honest, I decided to apply for a secondment at my company in compliance for maternity leave cover. At the time, being totally honest, it was to tick a box. A lot of general counsels, they asked for compliance experience. I thought, great, 1 year doing compliance, box ticked. What I didn't realize is how much I would really, really enjoy it. And what I enjoyed was getting that real breadth of knowledge across the business. It's an opportunity to see how decisions are made, but it's also an opportunity to help shape those better decisions and show cross-functional leadership, which is something I didn't feel like I was getting from a senior legal counsel role in my box doing contracts, looking up across the business and really seeing what drives the business forward and what we need to do to help enable that. This is really interesting for me. So that's how I fell into compliance.
Okay, so you fell in and then you've been here ever since.
Pretty much, yeah. So I did that compliance for a year, looking at financial crime and setting us up for our core authorization with the FCA. I then moved into governance, which was really interesting, setting up our risk and compliance committee and looking at how we take those decisions across the business. And now I've gone into risk, which is really interesting, looking at how we embed our risk frameworks across the different units in our business and make sure that they have the tools they need to make smart risk-based decisions.
Love that. So we're going to dive into a slightly harder question now. So this is around the statistic that around 50% of entry-level roles in GRC are covered by women. So we're half and half, equal split. And yet only 17% are chief risk officers and only 14% are chief compliance officers. Why do you think there's that gap? What have you seen and what does that resonate for you?
It does resonate, but I'm not sure the gap is fully related to the GRC profession itself. Like if we look at the legal profession, for example, 63% of solicitors are women, only 35% equity partners at law firms, only 29% of general counsels in the FTSE 100 are women. This is across the board, across industry. And I think it's a problem across the corporate world, not just a GRC problem. That being said, from what I've observed as a woman in her 30s with 2 small children, that there are these invisible barriers every day that I think prevent women making such strong leaps in their career journeys. So just giving a few examples, lots of women I know drop down to 4 days a week after having children while still delivering a full-time workload. So they're not really taking a step back, but it's the way that's perceived as being part-timers, even though they are still delivering what they're delivering before. They might work from home more days than their male counterparts. They might do more school pickups, less time at networking events, or even taking on extracurriculars like speaking at conferences. Or the extracurricular stuff they do is things like organising the International Women's Days events. And while that's important, is it the same as speaking at a conference about the importance of AI in the GRC profession? What's going to be seen to be sort of leading, being a thought leader in that space? And I also think, and I'm speaking for myself here, is, well, quite often we don't help ourselves, because I think women, particularly women with children, have this tendency to stay in a job too long because it feels comfortable, because we've built up the goodwill in the bank, so we know our bosses will be fine if a child's sick, they'll know we'll still deliver. All of those sorts of things. I've seen so many women just stay at a job the extra couple of years longer because they're worried about what will happen to the flexibility they need to juggle everything. And I think that stops you taking, if every job you stay in an extra 2 or 3 years, it takes you longer to get up that ladder.
That's so interesting. So what made you take the leap from your previous telecommunication company into this role as risk director?
So I feel like my career is a tale of secondments. So I did another secondment at the first telecommunications company. My boss went on maternity leave, so I stepped up to be the director of risk and compliance. And I loved it. I really, really enjoyed the role. She came back, and it was obvious that I just then needed to take the next step because, as is so often in the corporate world, right, it's very hierarchical. It's dead man's shoes, for want of a better expression. And so I looked around and I actually got approached directly on LinkedIn. So it's important to have a good LinkedIn presence to apply for this role. And it was just the absolute perfect fit.
Lovely. And have you had those moments where you felt slightly too comfortable and have had to push yourself, or have you always kind of just known, right, I'm moving on to the next thing?
I like to do the next thing a lot. I have a very broad range of interests, and I do get excited by new challenges. I love the chaos. So I love to be thrown into a role where it's sort of sink or swim and the chaos of getting things done. But I'd always done that in a very safe space of a company that knew me very well with sort of good sponsors. And it felt like I was taking a lot of sideways moves. So for 7 years, granted, I had 2 children in that 7 years, but for that 7-year period, I'd probably done 4 roles at the same career level, whilst everyone's saying that you're definitely ready for the next one. But I was a little bit too scared to look around, I think. I mean, I kept an eye on LinkedIn, but actually taking the step to apply, interview, taking the time to do that as well when you're trying to deliver in your job and everything else that you're juggling can be quite difficult. So I think it was taking that step up and realizing I'm good at this, I can do it, and it's time to do it somewhere else.
Yeah. This is something else that we've spoken about off podcast, just around the sort of second shift that a lot of women deal with. So there's the obviously caregiving role, and that can come in many different forms. You don't necessarily have to be a mother, but just that more maternal role in the home and all the different jobs that come with that. How do you manage that second shift alongside such a important role?
I think I'd better say, and it wouldn't be fair for me not to say, that my husband definitely also pulls a second shift. So we both live in London. Our families are both 5 hours away in opposite directions. And so we're here doing it on our own with 2 small kids and juggling it between us. So it wouldn't be fair to suggest that I was doing it all on my own. That being said, even doing half of that second shift is a lot. I think it's important to have boundaries. And I think it's important to also, if you're a woman in a leadership position, to shout about the fact that you're doing it. I'm sure everyone thinks I talk about my kids too much, but I think it's quite a shame when it's hidden. And so I will say I'm not available that morning because it's sports day, and I won't apologize for it. I won't block the time in my diary and pretend it's a doctor's appointment, because I think it's important for women coming up to see you can do it. And yes, of course, I'll probably log on that evening and my job still gets done, but it's important for people to see the job can still get done whilst giving the flexibility to be there at the moments that matter for your children. And so I've been lucky enough to have the support network in place to do it in terms of work. But also I think you need to pick your bosses wisely, as well as picking the next role. And if somewhere doesn't have a good culture, then don't go for that role. Go somewhere where you can have the flexibility, you can take the time that you need to do to balance everything, and you have supportive bosses and supportive sponsors who know that you're still delivering even while you're watching a 3-legged race.
Priorities, very good. So then if we dive into this a little bit more, have you personally experienced any barriers or biases in your career, and how did you go about navigating them?
Well, there's one story that springs to mind, and this is when I was doing that too scared to leave the company that I was very comfortable at, but wanted to step up. I applied for a head of risk and compliance role within that broader multinational company. I didn't get the role. And the HR person who told me I didn't get the role, she said to me, it's probably for the best, Lauren, because this job has a lot of travel and you do have 2 small children. And I was absolutely flabbergasted by it. I did, once I'd sort of calmed down and reflected, I called her back and explained how it was very much my decision how I would manage those things. I decided to apply for the role. It had nothing to do. And she was very quick to say, oh, it wasn't the reason we didn't select you for the role. But it did really make me think. And hindsight's a wonderful thing. And I do think it would have been the wrong role for me, not because of the travel, but because of that attitude. And would it have been the sort of place, actually, that I could have said, it's sports day, can we do that the following day instead? And actually, maybe, although places like this exist and it's terrible, then they're probably not the right role for you to balance what you want to do. And there are plenty of great companies out there that give the flexibility and that want you to deliver what you can deliver.
So when you gave that feedback, what did she say to you? Did she adjust her communication style? Do you think she'll go on to say it again?
I don't think she'll go on to say it again, but it was more, just because she's not saying it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And that's the thing about the invisible barriers, right? She'll probably be very careful not to say it. But given the number of interviews I had, and I know who got the job, and I know that my experience is better than his, it does just make me think they must have had that conversation, because why would it be forefront of her mind? But I'm in a better place now because a few months later I got this job and I couldn't be happier.
Good. I asked that question just because sometimes there is that sort of like freeze or fight mode that women can go in when there is that bias that comes across in the work, and particularly in the professional working environment where everything just seems so by the book, and then all of a sudden you're so shocked when something like that comes across. Would you advise to always, if you have the ability to say something, do you think it's worth kind of combating it?
I think it is, but I think it's also worth taking the time to think. So I didn't do it in the moment because I was so shocked in the moment. But a couple of days later, I asked for a call and then I gave that feedback. And sometimes I think it's worth taking the step back, because sometimes in the moment, if there is emotion involved as well, you might not articulate yourself in the way that you want to articulate yourself. And you might not be able to get it across. Whereas I'd probably in the moment I'd be like, well, that's not fair. It's nothing to do with you. Whereas instead I could give a really reasoned response as to why that wasn't appropriate and how it's my decision what job to apply for and whether or not I can make that work for my family, and it shouldn't come into their considerations at all. And I don't think I'd been able to do that in the moment. So I think it's also fine to take a step back and then think about it and come back if you want to come back and give that feedback.
Yeah, love that. Moving into more sort of the leadership GRC perspective, do you think women bring a different perspective to risk and compliance leadership?
I really hate making generalizations about what women are good at and what men are good at, because it's often not about gender, it's about skill set, it's about ability. That being said, I think true GRC leadership is about weighing up competing priorities, using your judgment to help the business make smart risk-based decisions. So if there's one gender that's known for the ability to juggle competing priorities, it's women. So I think there is something about taking in all these bits of information and then making a reasoned recommendations to the business. But I don't think it's really a gender thing, to be honest. I think it's very much about skill set and ability. And I also think the skill sets you need at a junior level in GRC are very different to what you need at a senior level. And that's also something to consider. So when it comes to a more senior role, you need to have the great interpersonal skills and you need to have really good commercial judgment. And I think those two things can come across either gender. Any gender can have those abilities. So I don't think it's particularly a gendered thing.
Yeah, it just depends on the person and their skill set.
Exactly.
In the organisations that you've worked for, what have you seen in regards to supporting women into moving into these leadership roles to help close that gap?
I think it needs a sort of a whole company and a whole industry shift in mindset. And I think in the last 10 years, I feel like I've seen that more and more. So it's thinking about your talent pipeline. It's thinking about the longer term development development plans for the people in your team, the ones that you see have talent. Where are they going to get their next opportunities? And if there are a couple of years where they want to reduce their hours, making sure that doesn't stop them being able to take more exciting opportunities as well. Thinking about even things like networking events taking place during the day. I love a breakfast networking event, and it's such an inclusive thing for anybody with caring responsibilities. You don't necessarily want to stay for a drink after work, and drinks after work aren't necessarily the most inclusive either. So some of the best networking opportunities I've been to recently have been those breakfast or lunch events. And that way you get a much broader collection of people in them. So it's facilitating those types of things, encouraging the women in your team to go and speak at conferences and things, not just think, well, I haven't got time for that alongside anything else. Help them make the time for that. Think about what they can deprioritize or delegate so they have the opportunity to go and speak at a conference or go to a conference to learn, rather than, again, particularly for women who are trying to do 100% of the job in 80% of the time, those are the things that get dropped because the deliverables can often be delivered in that time, especially with a very efficient person. So I think those are the types of things. It's a talent pipeline and supporting throughout the journey, I think, is key.
And are you involved in any kind of like mentorship program?
Yes, a couple. So I mentor a few people, and I also have a mentor. One of the programs I'm involved in actually it's called Mothers-in-Law, and this is something that one of my really good friends, Kim Carood, who is a general counsel, she set up for women who've had children and gone back to work in the sort of legal or legal adjacent professions to mentor women who have just had babies and are going back. And actually this morning, I had a mentoring session with my mentee. I think we've had about 10 sessions now, as she's sort of navigating that journey. And that's been really interesting. Similarly, I have a mentor, and that's been brilliant. I've constantly sought out mentors throughout my career. And I think it's good to see both sides as well.
Mm-hmm. And do you normally lean towards, or do you have no preference around a male mentor or a female mentor?
I think technically I have no preference, but I've also found that the ones who seem to have given me the best advice and get it have been female mentors. And that's not even saying that that mentor has to have had young children or gone through the same thing. But I have just found sort of much more direct advice because I see the different barriers women are facing, and therefore they can really give you sensible advice about how to overcome them. That being said, then you do tend to find that because there are fewer women at the top, they're taking on so many mentees because they feel like they have to give back. And that's sort of another level of the load on a woman, right? Now that you're successful, you need to take on more mentees and help them get up the ladder. And of course you should, but it is still another thing that you're doing that your male counterparts aren't necessarily doing. Although I do think we can also learn a lot from the people we mentor as well. It goes both ways.
Yes, particularly in the age of AI, Gen Z and what they can offer in regards to thinking about different outputs and stuff is so interesting.
Super interesting. And just their approach to work-life balance and everything else. I think we can take a lot from the different generations and how they approach things. Yeah, it's really interesting to see.
What are you guys, your team focusing on right now in regards to just GRC, AI, emerging technology?
Well, it's almost like you knew this was coming up because you just mentioned agentic AI, and it's one of the things that we're thinking about a lot at the moment. So we're looking at how we're improving the data that we've got and how we use it, how we harness AI, and how we use that to help leadership teams make better decisions. I think the key thing for me here is not just about let's get loads of data, let's do loads of pretty dashboards. It's about what data the leaders need to make good decisions. So, it's data for decisions, it's not for dashboards, and really focusing in on that. I think what's really interesting is looking at the partnership between humans and agentic AI, what that should look like, what it should look like from a GRC perspective, and how we can shape what that looks like as well, sort of across the business with our sort of risk and governance hats on, looking at the guardrails that are in place, making sure the right governance is in place. I think as well, thinking about how we make things, not just about how we make things more efficient. Like everyone's like, oh, we could do that in AI much more quickly. But I think it's not just about replacing what we do by AI. It's about how we can actually make real improvements in the way the business is operated. I went to a talk recently, and the speaker gave this really good example of how manufacturing used to be powered by steam engines. So you'd have a steam engine in the middle of the room powering all these machines. And then when electrification came in, the manufacturing businesses, so a lot of manufacturing businesses then replaced that steam engine with an electric engine. But the ones that survived are the ones that put an electric engine in every single machine. So it's not just about replacing what we're doing with AI, it's how do we actually harness it to make things better? And let's not just replace our steam engine with an electric engine. Let's think about how we put this electric engine in all the machines. And I think that's a really great way to think about like what we're doing, as everyone's sort of running around panicking about how we use AI better. Let's think about not just efficiencies. Let's think about changing the way we do things to make real improvements.
And as the director of risk, and you've got all these other departments who are also looking at AI, how do you talk to the board, the senior leadership team about managing the risk of the various different AI use cases that are coming into your company?
It's a really, really interesting point. And I think it's something everybody's grappling with. We've recently hired someone who's looking at AI sort of across the board. He is also the sponsor for like our key risk category related to AI. And then my team look at how we implement risk across all the units. So it's my team's job as well to help translate that into how things work in the units and make sure there's the bilateral discussion. But it's a really interesting point. I think it's something that everyone's grappling with. How do we make sure that we're not too hamstrung as well, that everyone's not frozen in fear about what can be done, and let's think about how we can do things quickly and safely and have the best possible outcomes.
I went to an AI conversation at Baringa recently with Risky Women, and they said ultimately the biggest risk is not doing anything at all with AI. So we all need to get moving.
We do in a safe way with guardrails. Yes, making sure customer data is protected, etc. But yeah, I think people need to get moving but I think start thinking creatively about it as well. We think of AI being really techie, but it's also about being creative and having that broader view of what can we do and how can we make this better if we sort of start from a blank sheet of paper.
So looking ahead, what do you think will define the next era of GRC, and how should leaders and people listening prepare for it?
I think this is really related to the last answer I gave, actually. I think we need to think about the partnership between humans and agentic AI. The future of the world of work and the future of GRC doesn't look like one without the other. So it's really about how does that partnership look like? And then as leaders, we need to think about not only what we want to do with AI, but how do we upskill our people to thrive in that new world? How do we make sure they have the skills they need? And if we don't have the skills we need, how do we make sure we get those skills to harness what we're already doing? And I think thinking a lot about who's got the sort of the tech, the coding skills, that deeper subject matter expertise, having that in-house to help upskill everybody else, but also to see what we can do in partnership. And I think that's the key. It's going to be all about skills and the partnership. I think it really is that partnership between humans and AI that needs to be looked at holistically, not individually. This is what AI is going to do. This is what humans are going to do. It's about what we're going to do together.
In regards to just GRC more broadly and those strategic conversations around risk and driving value for the business, how do you keep your stakeholders engaged and interested in the risk program, the compliance strategy?
I think it's all about the commercial understanding. If you don't understand your business, no one is going to care what you have to say, even if you've got the best points in the world about governance, risk, or compliance. So the key thing is really understand your business, understand what's driving your stakeholders, understand what it is they need to do, and help them get there, but in a safe way. So it's about making those smart risk-based decisions. And to keep them engaged, it really is thinking about their drivers, thinking about their objectives. What are they hoping to achieve this year? And what we are doing help them do that. And that's where you go from being that blocker to the enabler. Everyone always talks in this world about being an enabler, not a blocker. But I think the key is really just understanding the business and where you fit in. I think that's also what separates the leaders in this space. And my big advice for anyone who's sort of more junior in GRC is to take every opportunity you can to understand the business. Go to any talks that are being run about the new products you're launching and everything else. Really, really understand the business, really understand your stakeholders, and spend more of your time listening than you do telling them what they should be doing. Listen to what they need, and then think about how what we need to deliver can facilitate that.
Okay, so communication is key.
Exactly. That's a much quicker way of what I just said, Lucy.
So then moving outside, how has your career shaped who you are outside of work?
So, as you know, Lucy, from conversations that we've had outside of this podcast, I'm quite involved in politics. So for the last 4 years, I've been a local councillor in the Royal Borough of Greenwich. And while I'd say my career hasn't influenced my interest in politics, I think it's shaped my political thinking, and it's also given me different perspectives. So thinking a lot about how political decisions affect businesses, for example. I think my job, particularly the GRC role, has also really helped me be a better local councillor. So I think I have quite forensic attention to detail when it comes to reading the long scrutiny papers, the long planning papers, knowing what questions to ask, and understanding how a big organisation is run. So that commercial awareness I talked about earlier, I've been able to bring into sort of the local government arena to see, well, I know what we're doing in the private sector. What can we learn from the private sector here to make things more efficient, so that we can deliver more for our council taxpayers and for the residents in our borough? So I think I would probably say the career's helped me be better at the thing that I enjoy doing outside of work, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Has it given you confidence and assurance in your ability to be able to help the community as well?
Yeah, I think so, because I think quite often when it comes to politics, you see an awful lot of people who've only worked in politics.
Yes.
As well. So that sort of real world experience, a real business experience, having a very sort of clear understanding of what my strengths and my development areas from all of the leadership training and everything else that I do in the professional world, I think has really helped me be able to advocate for my residents better, to use legislation and regulation to advocate for my residents, and to come up with ideas of what we can do as a council that also helps promote business, which ultimately we need in order to have a thriving economy and to be able to help residents. So I think it really has worked hand in hand.
I'm always so impressed with your ability to time manage. The amount of stuff you've got on, it's insane.
I would say I'm no longer a councillor. I stood down at the last election. So it was just for 4 years I was juggling the work, the council and the children.
Wow, honestly. In regards to recommendations, are there any books or podcasts or people who have had a meaningful impact on your career that you'd like to recommend?
So I really love reading like behavioral psychology books. So I love all the nudge theory books, Thinking Fast and Slow, everything like that. I think one of my responsibilities in one of my roles was related to compliance training and how we not only how we sort of train people on what they should and shouldn't do, but how we create the behavioral change we need. So I love anything sort of behavioral psychology. I'm currently reading Matthew Syed's Rebel Ideas, which is brilliant. I'm only halfway through, but I'm really, really enjoying it. I'm getting lots of thoughts about how we sort of apply this diversity of thinking to the problems that we're facing with AI. So that's brilliant. And then there's another book called Rapport, which was thinking about how different people communicate. I use that quite a lot when I have difficult stakeholder interactions. I think about sort of how they like to communicate and then how I shift my style in order to further the GRC agenda. So those are probably the key recommendations from me.
Lovely. I love Matthew Syed. That's a very good recommendation. Thank you, Lauren. And then just to wrap up, is there any kind of advice or anything that you can say for more junior women in GRC when they're thinking about progressing into a role like yours as Director of Risk?
I think a big thing actually, which we haven't mentioned today, I don't think that much, is it's also okay to have a bit of a squiggly career. And I think particularly in GRC, because you need that real commercial awareness in order to lead in this space, taking a role for a year or two in the business doing something almost totally different really helps augment the skills that you've got, so that when you came back, you have that different level of understanding, and therefore you'll be able to communicate with your stakeholders better. And you can also sort of think about how what we're doing helps the stakeholders. So I think the big thing is not just to keep looking up at the next rung on the ladder, but think about looking across as well, and what skills you need and how you get those skills. Because as you get more senior, it's not just about knowledge, it's really about skill set. And you can get those skills from pursuing a different career for a couple of years. And I'm a big fan, as you've seen, of maternity leave secondments, because it's 9 months to a year where you can really get a completely different perspective. I think it's very rare that you see someone in a senior role that has just taken one step up the ladder constantly. It's definitely about the squiggly career, I think, to broaden your skill set and prepare for that leadership role.
So a real focus on skills.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Lauren, for joining us. Just a reminder, what was the award that you won back in 2024 with Women in GRC?
It was the Head of Governance of the Year award. So that was when I was doing my governance role.
Very well done. We hope to see you all at the award ceremony on the 2nd of July. Until then, we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.